How many times have I broken production? I think that's really it. Here's how we thought we understood that this code change was going to impact this metric, this number, and it impacted that number in like 10 other dashboards that the executives cared about. You know, software engineers break production all the time too, but there are more systems around that, right? There's more different types of testing and DevOps, and data right now does not quite have that. With data, it's living, it's constantly changing, it's evolving out from underneath you. So the code change today might look one way today, but another day tomorrow. I think dashboards are dead. I think there's a decreased need for BI tools. This is my hot take.
Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for listening to another episode of Data Innovators and Builders. This is your host Saket, and today I'm with Dori Wilson.
Hello.
Dori is the head of data at Recce. Dori, great to have you here.
Oh, it's incredible to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Awesome. So let's start with a little bit about your background. A lot of rich data experiences as well.
Oh yes. Yeah, no, I've had an awesome opportunity to see what does data look like in governmental institutions, in big tech, almost every flavor of startup you can have, including my own. And then now I'm working on building data validation tools and continuing to fill in gaps that I've seen in those companies and in those roles.
Tell us a little bit about your current company, Recce. Fascinating work you guys are doing in making maybe data more trusted and validated.
Yeah. So something that we believe at Recce is that, especially with the advent of AI, is that software engineering and data analysts, data science, data engineers, it's becoming closer and closer than ever. So like, what do I mean by that? I mean that software engineers are having to get more in the weeds with data, and data people, because of AI, are now able to get deeper in the weeds of engineering, right? Like having to know what is AI ops, I think is going to be standard on every data person's resume, or should be in the future. What we're doing is, as you do these things, how do you evaluate data? Right? Like engineering has DevOps, they have CI/CD, there's all these different tests, unit tests that they do. And in data, we do have tests, right? You can have your row counts, you can have your data observability tools, but what does it mean to evaluate how do code changes impact the data? And understanding that not just at a row count level, but contextually, like what does this mean? This metric went up 5%. Is that good or bad? Sometimes you create a new metric, you know it's going to impact the business, it's going to go up, maybe because you're now including more people in the set, maybe it's going to go down because you're increasing a filter. That's something that normal tests can't catch and that most people are doing manually. So at Recce, that's what we're trying to solve, is how do we make this a systematic process that is something easy that everyone can do. In the last 6 months, we've launched, what does this look like? Our data review agent. So now anytime that you open a PR, Recce will run. We understand your code. We understand the lineage as well, if you're impacting this model. What models downstream? What metrics downstream are impacted? Where and how much? And is that right? We surface that to the human. We're big believers in human in the loop, as well as like automated checks that will run of like, here's the distribution changes, here's the mean, the median, the 99th percentile, all of that.
Okay, so this is basically getting the context from your code, getting the context on your data, and then does it actually run and process data, or is it kind of building the knowledge to assess what's going to happen?
It's doing both. So it connects directly to analytics warehouses, and it compares your production to your development environments. So when we say, hey, there's this metric changing 5%, you can trust that. You can understand, oh, what I'm doing here in my development environment, this code chain I'm about to push, will impact this. Do I need to talk to stakeholders? Is this what I need to happen? As well as building this meta layer around it, because like context becoming so much more important with LLMs of why did you change that metric, right? Because you know now, and you can say it's right, but your teammate 2 months down the line when they're changing that metric, having the understanding of why you originally made that definition or made a tweak is going to inform them better, and that right now is really hard for a lot of teams to do. So we're also building that internal knowledge.
Okay. And who are the users? Are these the data analysts or data engineers, or who is using your tool today? Anyone
that is developing code and changing code that impacts data systems. So mostly it's analytics engineers, data engineers, data analysts, but we also have a UI where you can surface to a business stakeholder like, hey, your metric's being impacted. Does this look right? In a systematic way where you can have a conversation and it's tied back to a PR. So really trying to make this code first, really again, trying to make something that has become like typically Slack screenshots of charts back and forth, part of your natural environment.
And you've been, in a data science role at multiple companies. Tell us a little bit about maybe what you observed there or what you learned there that came to the conclusion that this sort of tooling or mechanism would make sense.
How many times have I broken production?
Yeah.
I think that's really it, right? Like at all these companies, I have a story. If you're like, I have a story about here's how production broke. Here's how we thought we understood that this code change was going to impact this metric, this number, and it impacted that number in like 10 other dashboards that the executives cared about, right? Like that type of change, which should just be systematic, like, software engineers break production all the time too, but there are more systems around that, right? There's more different types of testing and DevOps, and data right now does not quite have that. So trying to get at that thing of like, I don't have to do panic garbage fires because of bad code change that, I pushed or a teammate pushed. That's really what we're trying to solve.
Yeah, no, I think I would totally agree with you that software engineers have had a lot of tools. You can, run your software in QA and people can try that out. You can have beta releases, all that stuff. But, getting your production data and making changes, it's very hard to replicate and reassess that. So I think it's a great way to think about stability. Yeah.
Well, and in part because data is living.
Yeah.
Like I've thought about this a lot. Friends, my partner who's a software engineer, you can push it. And it and more or less for most things it works or it doesn't. With data, it's living, it's constantly changing, it's evolving out from underneath you. So the code change today might look one way today, but another day tomorrow, just because the nature of the source data has changed or the environment in which you operate has changed.
Okay. And what are the common patterns of breakage that people may not be thinking about, but perhaps should use your tool to detect?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it is you don't understand what you're impacting downstream. You understand, because the code base is just so hard, it's difficult to be like, I'm impacting this table. Well, down the lineage, 20 tables, 30 tables, whatever, there is a table that feeds to a dashboard that's going to be impacted, right? And that dashboard is something that maybe your VP looks at regularly, right? That is I think the most common thing that we see where people are coming to us of like, I don't know what else I'm impacting for sure, right? That we make that systematic, and we also tell you then how much, so it helps you surface to that person, hey, this is going to happen, just a heads up, or for you to take a step back and be like, I didn't know it was going to impact that, maybe I need to rethink this work.
Okay. Yeah, and we data people love talking about data contracts. So how does this relate to that aspect?
I think it helps you enforce those data contracts. We've talked to a lot of teams in a data contract. Most people want it. It's, I think, still a buzzword for most teams. This is a way where you can really enforce that in code, right? You can create custom checks that are codified of things. You can help put the responsibility both upstream and downstream of like, hey, you're going to impact me here. I'm going to impact you here in a way that is difficult for most other tools to get. So I would say very complementary.
Yeah, okay. Now, before Recce, you were a YC entrepreneur.
Yes.
That's a dream for many people.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that. What was the business idea you're working on, and what was your Y Combinator sort of story getting in there?
Oh, man. Yeah, so an absolute trip. I loved it. I learned so much. So it started when I actually got laid off. And when I got laid off, I was like, how can I turn this into the best thing that ever happened to me? Right? And I was like, you know what? If I got my founding career off the ground. So I got a couple of friends together and was like, hey, let's start something. So we actually we applied to YC as more of a forcing function of us getting our ideas together. Then we got the email saying, hey, you've been invited to interview. And it got like a lot more real. And then you get on the call, Michael Seibel's there, Tyler Bozeman is on the call, and they're 15 minutes late to do a 10-minute interview. And they just start getting into it. And it was fascinating. We originally were pitching a looker killer, so a better BI tool. After we got in, Michael got on a call with us, and we were all prepped to talk about, here's what we're going to build, here's why all this. And this is very common, threw it all out the window. I was like, I've invested in dozens of companies like yours. They all cap out to like 10 million ARR. What are they missing that you're not? Come back to me in a week. So we did a deep dive in a week of like, where's the real problem here? Is it in the data visualization? And now why looker BI? Let's go back to that. I, like a lot of data people have struggled with, I do really solid analyses. Well, now I have to communicate it to you. Now I can communicate it to you, but you're going to take that and communicate that to other people, right? And typically my original thought was like, this happens in a dashboard. People are sharing dashboards. But we really got in the weeds of it, and BI tools are not where a lot of these conversations are happening. And if you're at the dashboard, other than data literacy, you typically get the same answer, right? It really goes from when you put together a presentation, right? Because that's where the decision is made. No one's making a decision in a dashboard, or very few people, but they'll make it in a deck. So that's where we came on the idea with Thorntale of how do we make a data native presentation software, right? Trying to solve this gap that I had had in all of my roles across every company, from the Fed to Uber to Circle CI to Mux to Pave, about the analyses are good, but the communication is hard. And I need the communication to be good systematically across multiple people, because I'm not going to be in every room that my data is used.
Mm-hmm. That's very powerful, and I agree with you that ultimately it's the storytelling that really makes the decisions happen. So it's a new way of building slide decks with which is data native, right?
Yeah. It was, and I think one of my learnings is that I don't think the tool matters as much.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, like I really came down to, I thought this tool, we can just build a better tool.
Yeah.
People will get it. I actually think not it. It was really disappointing doing user interviews, and you're going into all these rooms and you're talking to all these people, like we all do as like founders and entrepreneurs, and you realize the pretty chart didn't do it. In fact, most people, pretty chart's just there to make them feel good. They don't really care about the nuts and bolts, and that deeply hurts. It's truly about how does the person craft the nuts and bolts together, which, building a better presentation tool is not going to do. So it's one of the multiple reasons why it did not work out.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to tell better storytelling, TLDR this, after hundreds of user interviews about data storytelling, from data teams to go-to-market teams, everyone in between, you need to understand, are you asking the right question? Most people are not asking the right question. Therefore, you can't tell a decent story. Once you get the right question down, and does this matter? Does this care? One thing I tell a lot of like junior analysts and everything, if it's not going to change the decision or improve something, why are you doing it? And push back on your stakeholders. We're all underwater. Push back on your stakeholders in that as well. Because then that's how you start getting the story. What will this change? Great. Boom, now you can talk about the story. I looked at these numbers, I pulled this model. Here's how it's going to impact this, here's my recommendation. Right? Keep it short and tight and tied to what it actually is people want, right? It's going back to entrepreneurship. Are you building something people want? What is their problem solution? No one just will pay you money for fun facts, but they will pay you money if you're solving their problem. And you got to keep that within data storytelling as well. It's a common thread.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that you have seen as an impact, and I was looking at your background, was at Mux.
Yep.
And one of the impact areas was every product feature adoption was leading to greater retention.
Yes.
Right? Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, that's real impact that you can go show the business, right?
Oh, absolutely. So this started because Mux wanted to understand how to better retain customers, right? They were building out their pay-as-you-go. Mux is usage-based. It's video infrastructure. If you're trying to do anything with video, they're great. Check them out. And it's hard because there is no such thing as direct user engagement when you're an infrastructure product. If they're coming to your website, something broke. You don't want people there, right? If you're just working, great. The numbers might go up, but it also could be tied to the company's doing well or doing poorly, right? Maybe no one's watching that video. So it was difficult to be like, well, what is retention if I can't fully count on usage, right? To see if they're getting value, right? Because the nature of their product, maybe they don't need that much video. And so that's where we came into features. And it was starting to be like, well, what moves the needle? What do our most successful people look like? Doing some logistic models around that, as well as just some correlation plots. I think a lot of times data people, we want to get really complex with it, but you don't need to.
Yeah.
And stakeholders love simple explanations. They'll trust a correlation plot over your really complex model because they can look at a plot. That's part of data storytelling itself. But each of those feature adoptions, the reason why the storytelling of why this mattered is they were getting more value from the platform that a competitor didn't offer or building themselves in-house didn't give them, right? if you're able to like, you want your custom watermarks, right? Like I'm sure this video will have a custom watermark on it, right? That was a feature that people could use. If you want to do higher resolution video, that's another feature we can use. Closed captions, that's like another feature. And having all of these different things, you want to offer MP4 downloads, right? That was a feature. And it was interesting trying to figure out, well, which features are leveraging the most on retention as well? Because you really had to segment it down on industries, right? So if you're something like an Upscrolled, which is a customer of Mux, they're doing user-generated content. Very different use case from somebody like HubSpot, who's also a Mux customer that has video embedded in their emails or on websites. And understanding how to retain both of those types of customers and their customers, right? Because now you're B2B to B.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. And each of these customers has a different type of a pattern.
Yeah.
How are you identifying like what features might matter to that, or like what's the data process behind the scenes to identify, measure, and then say, oh, this led to higher retention or greater revenue?
Yeah, great question. So it starts with what data is available, and can I get more available? Especially when you're like early stages at a company, or maybe they've been launching a bunch of new features and haven't needed as much rigor in understanding who is using it. So getting the data available, just table stakes. Modeling it in a way that you can trust it, right? Putting it where it's accessible also by other stakeholders, right? Something that I find useful is bringing along people as I'm doing analyses. So it's easier on the back end to get buy-in because they've seen chunks along the way. For the actual usage, once you have the metrics available, it's looking at, do I want to understand this at a daily, a weekly, a monthly? For this one, and this is common across multiple dev tools, if somebody uses you for 3 months, 90 days, they're going to stay with you for at least over a year. I have found like just getting to that milestone. So it was like, of the people that got to that milestone, what behaviors were they doing? And again, I can't look at user engagement, clicks, individuals, because it's companies, it's video assets. So the closest I had to engagement were the product features. So it was pulling, all right, what percent of companies, like of the companies that make it there, what percent are having any features? Maybe it was not features, right? This was something coming out. It's like, oh, they're using features. How many features are they using? What is like kind of the sweet spot? How quickly are they adopting these features? Were they self-serve, pay as you go, or were they enterprise where they're hand-holding, right? Was there anything else they were exposed to, right? We had also launched a bunch of new features relatively recently. So how much was that biasing? Like somebody from 3 years ago that retained really well, but there were only 3 features available. So they adopted one, but that was adopting 30% of features, right? And then also, how do you avoid selection bias, right? Of, oh, I'm only looking at people that made it to 90 days, but that's not telling me much about the people that churned and how I might better retain them. I don't want to be over-optimizing on the people we're already successful with. So I think that goes with the hypothesis from, all right, I'm noticing 3 features, 90 days. You want to get at least 1 new feature adopted in the first week. And then you can run an experiment on that. Start pushing out onboarding. You work with growth. You work with your CSMs. You work with your marketing. And if you see that that isn't working, that people aren't clicking through emails, right? Because it's not, you got to think about robustness checks here. Like if people started retaining more because they were using more features, but it wasn't due to like a marketing push or something else. Well, did the segment change? Did the industry change, right? Going back to like the HubSpot versus Upscrolled, right? Segmenting by those cohorts as well, because you're trying to piece out as much extraneous noise as you can when you're looking at these individual metric segments. Does that answer your question? I might have rambled a bit.
No, I think this totally answers the question. You really have to understand the specific business that your customer is in, and I can totally get it, right? I mean, if you are a consumer video, you may have a lot of views, but if you are an enterprise, video solution embedded in an email, it's not the views, that is a measurable thing. So I totally get that, and it makes sense that your sales, your marketing, everybody now, you have a metric to go sort of look at, like what's my feature adoption in 90 days, and then as you're improving that, right? And pretty interesting in terms of how many different segments are possible in this particular case, right?
And Mux was an older company, so there were more segments to be had, and they were more meaningful, right? Because like Mux's aha moment was really, they have us in production, and in production meant different things.
Now, if you contrast that with, maybe, other cases that you have been working with data, right? when you look at like the different teams that you interact with, maybe product teams, GTM teams, sales, what differences maybe have you seen in how they're adopting data, how you're storytelling to them, or would love to maybe see what are the differences around those.
Oh, incredible question. All of those groups care about different things.
Yeah.
And so your first thing is you got to understand, what do they care about? And to your point, what have I found? Sales wants to close people and they want numbers to go up to the right, but that's like in general. But then you have CSMs who want to focus on retaining customers. Mm-hmm. So they need to understand, is somebody engaged? How do I keep them, right? That's a different question than the AE or BDR that is trying to make a decent pitch to get somebody on board, right? Which is then a different pitch from the PM who wants to know, I launched this new product, I put a lot of political capital behind it, I got my engineers invested in this. Is it a success? And then at some companies, when you're a new data hire, if there hasn't been data, you're also doing a little bit of convincing people why they should use data in order to like answer their questions. So they're like, well, I've talked to 10 users and my users have told me it's great, which is early stage all you do because you don't have the scale. But when you're larger, you can have scale. And like sometimes the users that aren't talking to you are maybe more important than the ones that are, right? Just different natures of the beast. So you really got to figure out what is the motivation, what is the KPI, and what are they really asking? It goes back to what is the correct question, right? Because the PM's gonna be like, I want to know if it's successful or not. And you're like, cool, how, why, what are you looking at? What was this supposed to drive? Was this supposed to drive retention? Was it supposed to drive revenue? Was this something we've been hearing about from enterprise customers that you just had to ship anyways, right? So because those 3 different things you got to look at, right? Because if it's enterprise adoption, did enterprise people adopt it? Because it didn't matter about the pay-as-you-go, right? Because you wanted to know how the larger customers. If it's revenue, if it's not moving either a leading indicator for revenue or revenue itself, okay, that's a different thing. And then for retention, if you adopted it, but new people aren't using it, and the people that are adopting are already your most engaged users anyways, is that really a success?
Yeah. How do you get people to, trust their data? Because one of the things I've seen and heard from folks is, let's say it's your marketing leader. I love this campaign and I spent all this money on it, and you come back to them with like, oh, it's actually not working that well. How do you get them to be more objective, where there's always a judgment call involved as well, right?
Absolutely. Well, this is where I was getting back to bringing people along the way with you, right? You don't want to annoy them because you have a job to do. Like, you don't be a marketing leader, you don't need to be checking all the time, but they have a marketing analyst. Who do they listen to, right? And kind of seeding the way along this. Another way I found to get trust is some people really love numbers, right? Have that in the appendix slide. Don't necessarily put it in the main deck, but have it in the appendix, and being able to proactively answer their questions. If you ask a question, if you are giving a presentation to the marketing leader, and the marketing leader looks at your deck and then they have a question, and you can immediately flip to the next slide and there's the answer. They're going to trust you because you are now shown that you are thinking the way that they are thinking, which means you have attacked the problem the way that they want it attacked. But in order to do that, to speak their language, to understand what will convince them, what will make them trust me, you have to know, what do they care about? I've had executives where they have wanted to be in the weeds with me. So I was going through standard errors and standard deviations on my models and why I picked a certain model, right? VP level. I've had it where they did not care at all about the numbers at all. They just wanted like a couple of things, and for me to tell them a like curated opinion and then give them access to a Google sheet where they could play around themselves if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Right? It's individual. I think the problem with building trust is a lot of times we think it's a system when it is a people problem.
Oh yeah, very much. Very true. Coming back to Recce, the work that you are doing there is actually helping, I would say, validate that data, ship data with more trust. And you have agents doing some of that detection, and then you have human in the loop. So both are sort of working together.
Which goes to the validation and the trust issue.
The trust thing,
because no one is yet ready, and data teams included, to hand everything over to a data agent. But if the agent is doing a bunch of work that's surfacing it to you, that's a lot easier for you to take and go for it. The other thing, of course, with like getting people to trust you is not breaking production. Let me say this. That's another way that Recce's directly attacking that problem too.
Yeah. I think as we were talking earlier, right? I mean, validating data is a lot harder than validating code. Systems are not there. And you guys are introducing, I think leveraging AI in a way to do that, which I would say wasn't possible without LLMs, right? I mean, getting that context about your code, about the data, being able to understand what impact can be. And I was curious, like, what are some of those places where agents are doing a good job of detecting, and versus where, the human in the loop, humans are better at detecting issues?
Yeah, I think it's where you start having the lack of context. LLMs work best and agents work best when they have context around what is happening. Either that's historical basis, maybe a semantic layer, maybe you've spent time investing in skills or other things, or hooking it up to where it has documentation or understands the data contracts. If you don't have that documentation, which I think or most teams, that's where they start to break down. So you have to be building this context as you're working, right? Which is one of the reasons, like Recce with our agents, we're surfacing it. We're a little more on the cautious side, surfacing to you and starting to create that metadata of decisions and the why that can then improve the LLM going forward.
Yeah, and working myself in the world of AI, I would say context is super critical. The more we have been able to bring the context in, I'm seeing in our world of serving data to agents, the better context you're able to give, the better outcomes you're getting.
Absolutely.
Now, that context is, highly distributed in an enterprise, many documents and many heads. So when we were starting the conversation, we're talking about skills, right? And how important that is. So tell us a little bit about how you are seeing the evolution of skills in bringing that context together.
Yeah, in a few different ways. So Recce, we have built out our own plugin internally. So we have a plugin for external use, but also internally, where we've been turning our skills into things that the whole team can use. A specific example is we want to help our engineers write more build in public pieces and better documentation. So we have written skills that we keep iterating on. Every time you have a session, you iterate on, like, what have you learned, right? With the skills constantly improving, pruning itself. And also on the context, where should this be? Like, you don't need everything in the cloud memory file. Like, I think a lot of people who were talking about cloud code, right, focused on that. You can have other memory files that the skills themselves can pull. So when they're trying to write about our changelog to make sure that, okay, is like the grammar correct? Is the editorial correct? Are we focusing enough on like the so what versus just technically what we shipped? That information, that memory, can live in a different MD file that the skill that knows, oh, you're writing the changelog, will then pull. So it's not clogging up everything else everywhere. And then like an analytics repo, right? You have your semantic layers, but I also think putting some inline comments of like, hey, if somebody's looking and asking a question about this, pull this skill or look in these memory files here, is like another way where you can stagger it and kind of create these contextual layers without overwhelming it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues with working with AI models still, despite increasing context windows, is that there's still sometimes a loss in the middle problem with context. And I have seen now that most chat interfaces are starting to do context compaction on the go. It will take a moment, it'll compress your context and then sort of move forward. So yeah, of course, skills with their references to specific context to use, extremely valuable. One of the things we're talking about was also how skills are really the understanding of the business, the blueprint of how the business works. Tell us a little bit about how you are seeing skills becoming so critical to businesses and how we leverage AI.
Yeah, I think skills are really where you take LLMs and make them fit and work well for your use case, right? I think a lot of we had to deal with applications and other things that were generic, and we'd have to kind of work within them, like adjust our things to other people's frameworks. Now with LLMs and with skills, you don't have to do that. Take it, adapt it to what you need. What are the semantics that your company uses? What exactly is like the modeling structure that you use? What are the coding preferences with this? These are things that you can bake into skills and customize for your company and your team. With Recce, we've seen a lot of improvements in our own like data agent as we've improved the skills of like, hey, here's how, as you're reviewing the lineage, here's how to think about the impact. Having a skill that also pulls out, oh, here's the way we want to think about the data diffs. Here's the way that you want to pull it here and here when you have this sort of metric or this number, right? Like that is improving the performance because it's getting more specific and closer to the problem it's trying to solve and into what you care about specifically.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the things I've been seeing in terms of evolution of the work of data analysts and data scientists is the rise of what I would say is AI-based, data analysts, right?
Yep.
So instead of just thinking about dashboards and visualization, it's more about asking questions and insights, right?
Yeah.
And then being able to drill further and further into that. So how are you seeing the work of data analysts change as all of these visualization tools have brought AI into the mix?
Yeah. I think if your job was about data visualization and BI tools, it doesn't exist. And if your job is still doing that right now, you should be retooling. You have other valuable skills, but I think dashboards are dead. I think there's a decreased need for BI tools. This is my hot take.
Yeah.
Because what did we ever, going back to Thorntale, what did we learn? Like, people don't go to dashboards to make decisions. They went to dashboards to learn something, but now they don't have to go to a dashboard, right? They can just ask a thing, right? We all have a Slack channel where everyone's pinging our team, right? Asking us questions. And then we'd have to direct them to a dashboard that they would never remember, and they'd come back a month later and ask the question. Now they'll just ask the question. So your job is no longer the visualization. It's curating and creating the infrastructure necessary for these stakeholders in order to self-serve to answer their questions and to help them ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're doing anything but that, your job's going to be obsolete.
True. I mean, I think if you can bring together the data, the context, sort of the harnessing around the agents, so that you can get your stakeholder to ask the questions. And I think that coaching people, or maybe I don't know, what's a good way for asking the right questions, if you will?
I think you need to be in the room. And I think it's like data literacy. You need to teach data literacy, because now that people are going to be asking their own questions, they also need to be able to interpret it. So I do think that's coaching, and that's having conversations. And to build the infrastructure you need in order to serve their questions, you need to be talking with them anyways, because you got to be codifying the context and making sure the models are there, the semantics are there in the way that they need.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that data analysts have been doing quite a bit is kind of building those pipelines, in DBT, for example, writing those SQL jobs. How is that changing now with LLMs? Is it all being generated with AI?
So functionally on the ground, the people that we've been talking to and our customers and users have still been struggling with getting agents to fully own and write code.
Okay.
In part of the customization isn't there yet, or the nuances of, this can be the right command, but how it's going to impact data and again downstream is not necessarily captured, right? Like, I'll get an example is like, I put together a project where I was like, we're going to ingest a new data source. I'm going to build a bunch of skills. I'm going to see how well the agent builds out from like sourcing through staging to like fact mark all the way down. And when it got to the weekly table that I was doing, I needed it to do, it aggregated not by account distinct to get a number of users, but a max. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I think you still have to be deep in the code and deeply reviewing that. But I think they're getting better. And again, this is where I think skill usage comes in. I think building out the appropriate guardrails to kind of train the LLM to be able to do this, to give agents the tools that they need. I think that, in the same way that software engineers, fewer and fewer of them are in the weeds doing all of the code, and more doing the review of the code. I think that's where we're headed with analytics engineering. We had, maybe not to plug our own podcast, but on Data Renegades, we have our own podcast. We had Wes McKinney on, founder of Pandas and Apache Arrow, not writing any code. All these people that built these tools that we use that are the backbone of so many projects, they themselves are not writing code. Agents are writing code. Now, granted, he also said an LLM could not write Apache Arrow because it was like too well finely tuned. So there are things there. But if you're day in, day out, if most of the time you're not writing code, but reviewing code or having an agent do that, I think that is the future of where it's going. But how do we make sure it works and works at scale, works at regulated environments? That has not been solved.
Yeah, I totally agree. I see that not writing code anymore. My co-founder, I see, is like running 6 terminals at a time and talking to Claude Code in each of them. And it's giving the instructions, asking AI to build the test cases, running those, getting the code reviews done, but the pace of execution is much faster. It's all about the person knowing this is the problem I'm trying to solve, this is the approach that would make sense, and getting AI to do the work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking back about text and SQL, one of the things we noticed in our experience was that we define data products, and the more documentation that you put around the data products, what are these fields, what do they mean, what's the data about, the better it performed. And I was just curious, what extent are you seeing some of the mechanics like data products have existed pre-LLM, right? To what extent are those translating over in today's world when you are thinking about data contracts, validations, and so on?
I mean, I think a lot of like you're saying, the impetus, the reason behind creating that is very relevant. I just think the format and where that lives is very different. And do you need a whole separate product? How can you fit it in ways that LLMs can better engage with, right? Like, and in what terms? Like, we had data contracts, and a lot of that was to make things well between people. But with LLMs, if LLMs are doing the code and understanding the impacts, we don't necessarily need that as much between people as we need it to be a well scoped out thing in code, right? I mean, it's interesting because we're seeing this for data products of how much can we shift left, how much can we codify, how much we can get in Git controlled environments, right? So surprisingly, some teams aren't as deep in Git controlled environments. Some people living 5 years ago, a lot of people are they're in the future. But I mean, even go-to-market teams are shifting left in code, right? And codify and have LLMs do their pipelines. And how much of that is relevant for their products? It's interesting because it's for these products, what can be codified and what can't, I think is becoming a question. To bring it back, I'm thinking out loud. So maybe, yeah. And I think most of it can be codified.
Most of it can be, yeah. And one of the things is that much of the work that was happening, or maybe data contracts or writing stuff, has been about humans communicating with each other. But if we are using an AI first approach to doing that, maybe that communication, which can be an overhead also, right? Like, hey, I'm doing this, I need to tell you that, you need to get that context from me. Instead, you and I are both using agents, and then the context is shared between that. I mean, it creates a very different possibility of a work environment, maybe a lot more efficient as well, right?
Hopefully more efficient, right? Because we talk about institutional knowledge a lot, if you don't want it trapped in too much of one person. Well, now the LLM can be the institutional knowledge. It's just making sure and building out that way. I think it's interesting what you're saying, because the agentic first companies is institutional knowledge. It becomes the LLMs is its own knowledge bank and memory pool, right? And has context that you don't know. The thing that's concerning about that, though, is, I've seen this, somewhat internally, sometimes other teams, is if you put too much off on the LLM of your memory, of your processing, and of that communication, how much are you still internalizing? I'll give an example, right? I was talking with a teammate, and they'd written this up, and I was like, oh, this is great, but where's the user value? Tell me about the user experience of this feature you want to do. And they came back to me with something that was AI generated, right? Because they'd used a skill, we'd built a skill for this. And so I was talking to them about okay, this is interesting, all this, and they couldn't go as deep in it. Right, so this institutional knowledge of why this feature is valuable, what user context was there, but then we lost something about the deeper personal understanding of the thing that you were building.
Oh yeah. You cannot outsource that entire thinking process to an LLM and then just copy paste and throw that over. I think LLMs work great as a thought partner in many of these cases, but a thought partner is where you're still doing the fundamental thinking yourself and then using it to enhance, maybe test the boundary conditions, versus dumping a bunch of information to the LLM and just going with what it comes at.
And I've definitely been guilty of that, to be fair. I'm not sure. I absolutely have. But it's what we're working on. But you still have to be able to think through it and understand it and explain why.
No, I think
it's hard. It's hard not to, because you're like, oh man, this is good.
I'll tell you, because sometimes when you're working with an LLM and the amount of slop that it throws at you, you have now a whole bunch of stuff to read and digest and understand and process. And I think it looks okay to me.
Good,
ship it, and it doesn't work. So just so it doesn't feel like bragging my teammate. So we were rewriting our docs, and my teammate asked for me to review. I reviewed it, had Claude help me. I pushed it. She came back the next day. It was like,
there's a lot of redundancies in these docs. And it was stuff I had added because I just hadn't read as close what Claude was doing at things. And it's so easy to do and hard to catch. You're like, oh yeah, this reads super well. And then you have that outside view come in. You're like, you repeated the same thing in 3 different pages on like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think dangers of using AI all the time. So you've had an amazing career across these multiple companies, being an entrepreneur. What career advice would you give to people? And I really, one thing that really struck with me was when you said you were laid off from a job and you took that as a positive moment and said, you know what, I'm going to make this into a startup, right? So what career advice would you give to people early and getting started?
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think it's a hard market right now for everyone. But I think having and trying to cultivate an abundance mindset, which is like what I tried to do after I got laid off, right? And the people who were on my call laying me off, I'm still close with. Like, they're great. Like, we left on good terms. Like, sometimes the cost cuts just have to happen. And so I think that's the other thing is don't take it personally when these things hit you. Like, it sucks. No one wants to lay anyone off, but like, that's just life. That's the game we play. Cultivating that abundance mindset, maybe it would work out. Ship it. Try it. I think that was one of the biggest things I learned from like entrepreneurs. Like, I just applied to YC. We didn't expect to get in. Then we got in.
Yeah.
But then I was able to raise more money. Then I was able to build a product. I didn't know sales. Didn't know how to do conversations. I was a little nerd in the back room. How to learn how to do sales. How to learn how to do marketing. And it's like one of those things where, you limit yourself so much because you think about, oh, well, I can't do this because of this external factor. Why not? Why? Why is that external factor stopping you? And sometimes there are hard constraints of like, well, I can't go full-time building because like, I have kids, I have a mortgage, I have loans. Like there are hard constraints. I want to be very real about that, But at the same time, I think some of these hard constraints, there are other workarounds for other things. And you can modify, maybe, you can't quit and go full-time. Is there somewhere in between that you can do? Are there other ways of up-leveling? And just having an abundant mindset of like, okay, some things are just not going to be feasible, but what is feasible? And not just taking that surface level answer of like, I can't, I won't, I shouldn't, and really stress testing yourself on that. That would be the advice I would give. And early in your career, people. LLMs are coming for technical skills. Can you work with people? Can you do a network? I've offered myself as a resource to a lot of like new grads and people in college. Do you know the number that actually take me up on that? I've been at 8 different companies, have a network. Like 1 in 10. If you don't follow up, I can't help you. No one can help you. Yeah. If you're not, like the biggest thing you can be right now is hungry and not limiting yourself before somebody else limits for you. Because the world will limit you. You just don't need to start. Mm-hmm. Right? Like if I hadn't been laid off, I wouldn't have applied to YC. That's how I made that one of the best things that ever happened to me, because that changed the trajectory of my career. I learned so much. It was such a crucible. I met incredible people. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm here, right? Having this conversation. And you don't necessarily have to be that extreme, I think, to have these experiences, but you have to not limit yourself. Because I could have just gone, man, like, all this sucks. Like, I'm crappy, this is awful. And I did find a job. I did have a job, but that's why I was only paid for 3 months, because then I got into YC. So I was doing both. Like, I had real constraints, I got to pay rent, and also how can I like make this work? It's just open yourself up to that possibility.
Yeah, I mean, very well said. The human potential is actually massive. And sometimes it's those difficult situations that push us beyond that boundary. Otherwise, you're comfortable in where you are. And I would agree with you. Sometimes what at that moment looks like a bad situation turns out to be the start of something great. So yeah, very, very well said. I think I'm also finding now that one of the sort of unlocks, yes, AI is going to impact a lot of jobs. We kind of understand that. We don't even know in what ways, by the way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in some ways, it's also an enabler. If you have agency and you can think of a problem you're passionate about and you go about to solve it, it becomes your best tool to actually go solve that, because now you're not constrained by, I need money, I need a lot of people and all that stuff. You can actually get pretty far along just by having that agency and curiosity and pushing on that, right?
Yeah, agreed. The creativity.
Yeah.
I think it's no longer technically, that's the limit.
Yeah.
It's the creativity of like, Can you think about it? Can you articulate it well? It used to be, I would say, the most useful class I had in undergrad was my probability statistics course that was tying that to programming. Incredible. No more. Last year, it has become the class I took on how to teach writing and the year of creative writing I took under a New York Times bestseller. Because now that's what I have to do. That's what I do in my job is I write and I communicate well, and I have to think creatively about how can I explain something that is an abstract concept. How can I world build for an LLM to then build the modeling that I need, right? And so it's writing, I think, is such a skill because that's the creative nature that you're having to do right now.
Yeah, I think I was reading about someone telling their kids that math and writing, like those are the two, like communicate. So understand the problems, and a math is more like a
What's the
way of-
logic?
yeah, exactly.
Higher level
yeah,
mathematics is extremely creative.
yeah.
Right? Like once you get past calculus and the upper level proofs, because I was a PhD dropout, was an economics PhD program, that's just applied math. It's extremely creative. And you're having to problem solve. And you have to think about things like one of the tricks in the PhD program for solving equations is you add and subtract zero, but the zero is like a function that you're adding and subtracting from both sides. But that changes the way and unlocks your ability to then solve the equation, right? That's a creative thing that you have to think through in a very logical way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, interesting and exciting times in some ways and also scary in some other ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think your advice is right on, is, in terms of how people should think about their career and how they can build on that. So thank you so much, Dori. It's been a pleasure talking to you. If people want to follow up with you, and you said you're very generous with your willingness to give advice to people, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, obviously, I think like everyone in the B2B is as well. I'm also on Blue Sky, and you can always send me an email at dori@reccehq.com. That's DORI. Yeah, and happy to chat, please. If people are hungry and want to learn, whatever advice I have, it may or may not be good, I'm willing to share. Like I'm very much, I went to public schools, and it's hard to find mentors, and I understand that, and I want to try and give back to others that might be struggling, especially in these times where I think it's so uncertain, and maybe my advice is awful, I don't know, but willing to give what I can.
Well, it's all about the opportunities you take, actually. So I think I would highly recommend for folks to take on that. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you.